that makes sense. I mean, you've seen these issues from different perspectives on a school board, now in Congress. Is the federal government now organized to maximize the value of the dollars it invests in disadvantaged communities?
Absolutely not, and I thank you for raising this important question, because we see in poll after poll this issue of jobs and the economy. And of course that means people are concerned about jobs and the economy, but I think it means a lot more than that. It means that there's this great sense of hopelessness, of insecurity, maybe pessimism about the future of the country. And what we have to do is disrupt the existing model. I mean, we've seen how a lot of these programs and even departments end up becoming almost exclusively about self-preservation and not about the original mission. We've seen it with education in our country. Education, first school that opened was to serve kids. Eventually, education became about the bureaucracy and all the special interests attached to it. We've seen it with the VA. The VA was about serving veterans, and a couple of years ago it became evident that there had been a lack of commitment to the mission. So with our anti-poverty programs, it's the same exact thing. I think we've lost sight of who we're trying to help and how we're trying to help them, and we're measuring success by how many people we add to these programs rather than by the outcomes. And we have colleagues that are working on this. Chairman Ryan was talking about this almost on a weekly basis. And I think the party and the leaders that come up with the solutions for these problems are going to win the future in American politics.
You know, a lot of the effort over the years, and I think in both parties, have looked to various tax incentives to try to bring investment into neighborhoods that are somewhat starved for it. The new market tax credit, for instance, is one you support. Are tax breaks big enough to make a dent, a real dent in investment patterns without other changes in terms of safety? You mentioned blight, education. How far can tax breaks take you in terms of bringing opportunity into neighborhoods that now feel isolated?
Well, they can go a long way, actually. And all those are elements that you mentioned that need to be addressed on a community level and some on a federal level. But when you're looking at capital and how and its migration, where you're trying to attract it into an urban area, and you're looking at both urban development and greenfields, the economic development delta that I was talking about, with where it costs more to do business within the city because of land assembly, brownfield, environmental issues and concerns. If you can make that even, which sometimes is not substantial, but is a requirement, you can catch that dollar. You can bring that capital back in the urban area, and you can do that through tax credits. That leverages and pulls back in the capital to the urban area.
You know, we, Representative Curbelo, last time we met, we were outside your office in Miami, and Florida is a good place to ask this question about. One of the areas of policy continuity from President Clinton through President George W. Bush was a sustained effort to increase home ownership rates, particularly in minority communities. And there were a lot of different policies under both of them that were designed to encourage home ownership. Since the crash in 2007, we've seen a bigger decline in minority home ownership than among whites. Should public policy be aimed at reversing that? I mean, should we be trying to get minority home ownership rates back up to their peaks that they were earlier in this decade, or is the evidence or is the experience of the downturn that is too risky a way to try to build wealth in low-income communities?
I think it's dangerous. Look, home ownership is a positive goal. It's laudable. But how we go about promoting it, that's where it gets hairy. And the fact is, we encouraged a lot of people to take on debt that they could not service. And we ended up hurting, like many of these government policies, we ended up hurting the very people who we were trying to help. So I do think that we should encourage home ownership, but perhaps in an indirect way, by expanding economic opportunity, by investing in education so that these low-income families, their children, can then have the opportunity to decide for themselves whether or not they want to own a home, meaning they have the economic power to make that decision, rather than the government saying, here, you should really try to own a home and we're going to try to make it as easy as possible for you. We create these bubbles, And it's not the people at the top that get hurt when the bubbles burst. Yeah, some people lost millions of dollars, but they still had millions of dollars. The people who lost their homes are the ones that pay the highest.
You were
price.
mayor during much of this. What was your take?
Yes, actually, we did a study in my community on this. We were sort of ground zero for the mortgage foreclosure crisis, both in Ohio and in our city. And we were very concerned as to the lending practices and what we might be able to do to keep people in their homes and to try to assist people who were in distress. And what we found is it wasn't the traditional slogan that people had, people who buy houses that they couldn't afford, that was the issue. It was the refinancing process. People who bought a home, largely bought a home that they could afford, that they could sustain, but then subsequent, while they owned the home, in the refinancing process where houses were used like ATMs, they overfinanced the house. They were given predatory loans and taken advantage of in transactions they didn't know. People had a sense that well, they wouldn't be giving me this loan because there were rules and regulations unless I could afford this loan. And in our study, over 90% of the people who were losing their house lost it due to refinancing, not because they bought a house they could not afford. So it was the wild, wild west of lending and refinancing that really decimated huge areas in our community. There were neighborhoods where we had 1 in 5 houses that were foreclosed on. And in our urban area, frequently if the house is foreclosed on, it goes to abandonment. If it goes to abandonment, it becomes a blight against the
And pulls down the surrounding. Let me show you another area of economic development, and one that Dayton really is, I think, had a profile and national leadership in, which was attracting immigrants as a way of rebuilding population, rebuilding workforce. Dayton has had several years now of systematic programs to bring immigrants into the community, try to help integrate them into the community as a way of kind of promoting economic vitality. You now have some voices, including some presidential candidates in the Republican Party, saying that we need to reduce legal immigration as a way of safeguarding opportunities for native-born workers. What do you think of that?
Well, I think, well, first off, the program of embracing and welcoming is incredibly important in the sense of a community and making sure that people are engaged, and certainly it is also an economic opportunity as people look to where the in-migration of population can be in the in-migration of capital. But I think the issue of legal migration should certainly be put down at the bottom of the list as we just deal with trying to look at a immigration system that can be reformed in a way that people sense that we have control of our borders, are addressing the issue of those that are here and looking at the ways in which we can embrace our heritage as an immigrant population.
Yeah, President Curbelo, both legal and undocumented immigration. What do you think the next step should be?
Look, on legal immigration, Jeb Bush has a great line. He says the United States gets the top 10, 20,000 draft choices in the world every single year, and we should take advantage of that. There are many needs in this country in engineering and areas, in low-skilled areas where we need immigration, and immigration has kept our country youthful and energetic and hungry over the decades. We shouldn't turn our backs on that now and become an inward-looking nation that puts up walls and ignores the rest of the world. That's kind of like some of our friends who reject free trade. I mean, free trade is the way of the world, and we need to embrace it and take advantage of it because it's not going away. So, how we do it, I know there's some disagreement there, and that's fine. But we cannot say, we're going to end free trade or we're going to end immigration. It just makes no sense. And in terms of the undocumented population, it's really about time that people grow up and accept that it makes no sense to have 11 to 12 million people in this country that are unaccounted for, that are here, that are working, but that we want to ignore. We need to find a way to allow those people to incorporate themselves into the country. There are many ways of doing that, everything from a path to citizenship to just allowing people to work, which would also be a good thing because at the end of the day, most of the people who came illegally to the country didn't come here to vote, although perhaps they should. They came here to work, and they want to contribute to our economy, and we should give them the opportunity to do that because they're here, they're working, and they're not going anywhere. So I hope that our party becomes more proactive about finding
We're going
solutions.
to bring the audience in for questions in a moment if you want to start lining up. Let me ask you, Representative Turner, what do you think? On the undocumented side, you did have the bill pass the Senate. Yeah, really, we've had two go-rounds of this. 2006, Senate passes a bill with bipartisan support, House doesn't take it up. 2013, Senate passes a bill with bipartisan support, House doesn't take it up. Almost the exact vote in the Senate, almost the exact vote in the process in the House. Why is it so tough for the House even to bring this to a vote? And do you think that will change at any point? Or what would change that?
I think largely I think the American public even see this as an issue of trust. And the issue of not being able to control the border is integral to the whole discussion of what are we going to do about immigration and reforming any of our laws. Until we can get a sense or an administration that is committed to a process of controlling the border, I think you're going to continue to have that sense of distrust. The images that we see on a regular basis of the lack of control over the border, I think it certainly has an impact on the
So is the implication of that,
discussion.
is the implication of that with a Republican president who you felt confident was putting the right resources into border security, a Republican House would be more willing to consider this issue?
I don't think it's a partisan issue. I think it's absolutely a control issue. I don't think President Bush had a great record on this either. We didn't have great strides then, but I think that is the threshold question that needs to be addressed before we have an effective national debate.
I don't know if anybody's at the microphone yet, so let me ask you, I'm going to use my time here. One of the things we're going to be talking about in the next panels is the emergence of the enormous buying power of what we call the next America. This diverse America is increasingly shaping consumer markets. And I think one of the questions is, are we positioned to use that opportunity to help build minority small business and wealth in minority communities? Are minority entrepreneurs sufficiently capitalized? You've talked a lot about access to capital to take advantage of these new markets that are emerging that everybody's going to be competing for. I'm interested in your thoughts about where we are in terms of minority entrepreneurs having the wherewithal to establish, to kind of put down the roots to respond to these new markets, and what, if anything, the federal government should do to help them.
Yeah, I'm on the Small Business Committee, so this is an important issue for me that I deal with on a weekly basis. And we need to do more to make sure that small businesses don't get crowded out. We're seeing a lot of consolidation across many industries in our country. And we need to fight to make sure there's a space for those small businesses. Something we did in the Small Business Committee, a bill I introduced, and we actually got language into the NDAA, is making sure that federal agencies meet their subcontracting goals for small businesses. They've been missing them consistently, and we've now inserted an accountability mechanism into the bonuses that agency heads are paid that requires them to meet their subcontracting goals for small businesses. Had they met those goals in recent years, small businesses would have received an additional $5.1 billion. So certainly we need to do everything we can to strengthen these small businesses, and I work with Seth Moulton, a Democratic colleague of mine, to make it easier for small businesses to capitalize. Microloans, certainly access to capital is an issue that we Republicans are very concerned with. Dodd-Frank has certainly made it too hard for those that have a dream, that have an idea, to pursue it. So definitely a lot of work to do there.
Let me stick with you for a separate question, drawing on your experience at the Miami-Dade School Board, because Representative Turner has talked a lot about the importance of economically diverse neighborhoods. I mean, that was a really key part of your message. One thing we know from federal government statistics is that we are at a point where almost half of all the school kids in America now attend schools that are majority poor. In fact, 3/4 of African American students, 2/3 of Hispanic students attend schools where a majority of their classmates meet the federal definition for low income or poverty. When we are looking at that kind of concentrated poverty, how big a hurdle is that to any of the other ways in which we want to try to improve schools?
It's huge, Ron, because what we're doing is preserving a culture of failure, really. And you have to look at states like Florida. And by the way, a lot of conservatives these days run from the education reform movement, which in my opinion has done more for low-income families in this country than any welfare program. But the education reform movement has really saved public education in this country from dropping into complete mediocrity. charter schools, choice programs. In Miami-Dade County today, more than half of the students attend a school of their choice. So we have done a lot to promote magnets, to promote school choice, and that has given children and families the mobility that they need to find the best school for them. And you're not condemned to attending the failing school. And a lot of those failing schools are improving as well. We no longer have F high schools in Miami-Dade County. So the education reform movement that began at the state level in the 1990s, that inspired No Child Left Behind, a flawed but important landmark legislation, despite its flaws, has done a lot more to help low-income families in this country than any of the welfare programs we have today.
You both got to get back and vote, among other things. But let me ask you both real quick. You are two exceptions in the Republican Party in that you both represent urban constituencies. You're the vice chair of the Urban Caucus. I think you're the only Republican on the caucus. You have a party where the most members are representing suburban to exurban to rural districts. Most big cities, Miami being a prominent exception, but most big cities now have Democratic mayors. Is the Republican Party, is there a challenge for the party in being less connected than it once was to urban areas, and for you to get a hearing on some of the issues that matter to urban areas?
Well, I think there is a learning curve, I think certainly the Republican Party has a role and has policies that are important and need to be implemented. But the problem that you have is you have this political stasis if there's no dialogue and debate occurring. As you look to the administration's talk of promise zones and not siloing, and then you look at Paul Ryan's proposal, and because it's Paul Ryan's proposal with breaking down silos, it's a non-starter. We have to get to the point where the goal is saving cities, intervention in poverty in a meaningful way, and how do we come together with some of the best ideas. It's going to take both parties to come up with the ideas as to how we should implement this and make a difference.
Yeah, our party has to realize that our solutions are the ones that can most benefit low-income families in this country. I mean, since I've been alive, it's been conventional wisdom that the Democratic Party is the party for the poor. We're the party for the poor, and we need to become comfortable with that, and we need to take advantage of that. And we have to realize that if poor people have an opportunity to succeed in this country, it means everyone has an opportunity to succeed in this country. So I've offered Chairman Ryan my help in any way I can to bring these issues to the forefront.
Do you like his basic blueprint that he's put forward?
I think his concept of disrupting the current system, the way we did with education, will go a long way to making these programs more effective and to helping people.
Well, great final thought. Well, listen, join me in thanking Representatives Turner and Curbelo. Thank you so much.